大家都知道，广场协议是日本经济上发展史上非常重要的一个事件。我注意到，就是说，在广场协议签订之前，大概1984年，日本的人均 GDP 大概是1.2万美元。然后签订了广场协议之后，很快就到了2.5万美元。这个东西是不是其实是一个统计现象，而不是一个经济发展现象？因为汇率变了，汇率升值了差不多1倍。然后再后来，就是日本发生了一个，就是说资产价格飞速上涨的一个阶段，从85年到93年，日本的人均 GDP 大概就是说一直到了4万美元这个水平。这个增长是不是主要是资产价格推动的
Well, it's all about the exchange rate, right? When Plaza happened, it was 240 yen to a US dollar. 10 years later, 1995, it was 80 yen to the dollar. So exchange rate moved, well, basically 3 times. And so even if per capita GDP is growing slowly, exchange rate moved 3 times, then of course you get that effect. I find these exchange rate movements very, very misleading because if you start 240 as the correct exchange rate, then it looks like it's tripled. But 1978, so that's 8 years before the Plaza, exchange rate was 175. So if you start from 1978, from 175, it's not such a big move. So depending on where you start your calculation, the result could be widely different. If you start from 1978, it doesn't look so big. But if you start from 1985, Plaza, then it looks a huge difference because there was a big depreciation of the Japanese yen from 1978 to 1985, from 175 to 240. So depending on where you pick as a starting point, your calculations will be all affected very, very badly. So I think to avoid that, I think we should stick with purchasing power parity of some kind. And if you go by purchasing power parity, the movements are much slower. It's not like this, but it's a very gradual move. And even purchasing power parity is not without problems because what people buy in different countries are different. And so it's very difficult to compare across countries. And I think we should not make too much out of these exchange rate movements and look at the purchasing power parity and see how the people's living standards are improving over the years instead of just looking at per capita GDP, nominal per capita GDP.
对，如果我们从汇率的角度看，从85年到现在，日本的人均 GDP 是这样的，然后这样，是吧？那如果从购买力评价的，从85年到现在是怎么样呢？是这样吗？
And living in Japan for the last 40 years, I must say, the life has not been bad at all. It's actually very good, which is why I stay there. If Japan is as bad as some people wrote in Western papers, I would have left Japan long ago and returned to San Francisco or come this way or wherever. The place is still very safe, very clean, very predictable. Most foreigners who live in Japan ended up liking it a lot. And many of them would rather stay than be transferred out to some other location because the living environment is actually very nice and it remain nice. Even though it's a pursued economy with all sorts of problems, it still stays, far more comfortable than living in the United States.